Growing up in Zimbabwe, Danai Gurira didn't see a lot of characters who looked like her on the stage or screen. But eventually she would turn that void into a crusade that cast her homeland into the spotlight, earned her a Tony nomination, starring roles in The Walking Dead and the international blockbuster Black Panther, and put her on the path to breaking big. What makes people successful? What are the unexpected turns in life that propel people to greatness? I'm Carlos Watson, editor of OZY. I'm out to uncover the real secrets behind breaking big.
How many of you are from Eastern Africa? Oh, so long. Southern Africa. I'm so sorry I won't be here this weekend. I have to go back to the States tonight, but I'm going to give you a little present that is, go watch Black Panther this weekend. I'm just thankful I got to be a part of it. It sort of shows that world where we think beyond whatever trauma we've experienced as a continent, and we reclaim ourselves and our greatness, and we find our way to our best modernity. This continent is powerful and wealthy and has astounding potential. We have to reclaim ourselves, reclaim the power of who we just are.
Between The Walking Dead and the worldwide phenomenon Black Panther, Danai Gurira is in high demand. But for her, the success isn't as important as the opportunity to share the untold stories about her homeland, Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe was in a very prosperous place in the 80s and the first half of the 90s. But there was a lot of work going on around women's rights in Zimbabwe when I was growing up. In the early 80s, women couldn't have their own bank account, but by the mid-80s, they could, and then there was inheritance rights. Can a woman inherit the land and inherit the property? And that's a whole issue of the men being the inheritors just by right, and various other things, or even marital rape, which in a lot of societies, it's actually not considered a thing, and Zimbabwe actually got to the point where it's on the books that it is. I had a passion for women being considered equals starting from a child, really.
Did you ever think about staying in Zim for college? Was that a possibility?
You know, it wasn't, and I'll tell you why. My parents went to the United States for college. My siblings had all gone. I was the fourth child. My path was very clear. Our home was just different. When I came here at 19, I made the resolve in that moment that I would go home and be connected to Zimbabwe as much as possible.
In 1997, following the path laid out by her family, Danai went to the US for college to pursue a career in academics.
I grew up in academia. I grew up on university campuses. My parents are academics. And so I was in the psychology program in this wonderful college in Minnesota. But I just found myself yearning to be telling stories of the things I was researching versus just researching them.
And why? What happened?
Funnily enough, I was trying to do a semester abroad. And there's one that was in Cape Town, and it was called Arts and Social Change. Like on the steps of University of Cape Town, I was around all these artists and activists who had used their craft to fight apartheid, to fight HIV/AIDS, to fight rape. Living in Zimbabwe and Southern Africa, there are people with aspirations, personalities, nuances, and complexities who are going through this. They're not just a statistic. When it comes to the States, it's all about statistics. It's all about, this is what's happening on the continent, whose stories are so rarely told. And it just sort of hit me that I want to tell African women's stories.
Being from the continent, you are in the majority, and you come to a place where you are considered a minority, or there are all these preconceived notions of you. It's an affront to your own sense of being, because you walk with pride when you come from the continent. It's that force of nature to really shape and hone an artist. And Danai is a shining example of that.
I had chosen to not pursue the dramatic arts major in college, but I had been very involved in the arts. It was definitely a transitional moment where I was no longer going to apply to PhD programs in social psychology. I was going to now start applying to MFA programs in acting.
In 2001, after committing to sharing the untold stories of African women, Danai was accepted into one of the most prestigious theater programs in the country, graduate acting at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts.
Well, every year at the MFA program at NYU, 800 people apply for 18 positions. So they have to not only be diverse in every aspect of that word, they have to be super duper talented, and Danai made an impression right off the bat.
When she came in for her audition, the chair at the moment, Zelda Fitchandler, read from Danai's statement. And Zelda was sort of awed by that because she wrote about what she wanted in this world. She wrote about what was her best wishes for herself, her country. She had a real strong belief in where she came from. That helped her.
So you show up at the prestigious Tisch School at NYU, and at that point you feel confident you're going to become a working actor and playwright, or is there still a question about whether you'll succeed?
See, in my brain, it wasn't about success or getting an acting job. In my brain, it was just about following my calling. Like, I literally just had this burden on my heart that I had to get done. And I felt weird when I got there because it wasn't necessarily what everyone else was doing.
I mean, she had the same struggles that everyone would have doing a character from Shakespeare or a character from Ibsen. She played characters that are totally different from her. It was difficult.
This was my apprenticeship. This is where I had to go to learn all the rules so I'd know how to break them. This is where I go and learn all the things that the dead white guys did so I can understand who they were and what they were about, but also to understand I'm not going to be them, but I'm going to be me.
Watching Danai, the minute that she started to talk about Zimbabwe and her family, the minute she started opening herself up to the fact that that was not a liability but a possibility, I think that changed her way of engaging her artistry here in this program.
Danai's instincts to embrace her heritage prepared her to go beyond simply acting. But it was the influence of a true theater legend that helped her develop her skills as a storyteller.
Zelda Fitchandler, who passed last year, kind of founded regional theater in America, and she created a program which was all about, I don't want my artists sitting by the phone waiting to be hired. I want them to know at all times that they are artists.
What happens after the curtain comes down? What happens if you're not working? If you're working in a restaurant, what's going on in your brain? And what she really wanted to cultivate were individuals who could go beyond simply impersonating a character, but creating a universe.
So she taught us how to create our own work. 30 years, do your own thing, here are the facilities, take over, produce it, do whatever you want to do with this slot of time. And that's when I created my first play. That's when I created In the Continuum.
You have the virus, which causes the acquired immune deficiency syndrome.
My first thing out of grad school was really what I'd come to school to learn how to do, is create a story that turns on its head the concept of Africans and African women, specifically around HIV/AIDS, which was something I grew up seeing, the onslaught of it growing up in Harare, Zimbabwe in the 80s and 90s. Like, that's when it hit Southern Africa.
Like, literally, were they friends? Were they family?
All of it, absolutely. Friends, family, classmates, so lose a parent, it was all over.
There's no cure for AIDS.
You trying to say I'm
the person infected with HIV.
Do I look like a junkie?
I remember my co-star and co-creator of In the Continuum, she came across the statistic around African-American women and how it was the #1 killer between the ages of 25 and 34. And she was like, what? That's my age group. Where are the stories?
She did this character in Zimbabwe, and Nicole Salter did a character from the Bronx. They actually made 2 separate pieces. They were parallel pieces. And it wasn't until a week or 10 days before they presented it that someone said, why don't you guys just do this as one show?
Of course, it was a risky thing to do. You know, I'm standing in front of the American industry and performing various Zimbabwean characters, going into my own language half the time and expecting them to keep up. And one of the interesting things that I learned during that time was that, yeah, you're gonna tell stories, and you might tell stories that are gonna make people uncomfortable, and you've gotta be okay with that.
It was extremely sophisticated, and the minute it was put on stage, the bar rose. It went on to be done commercially, done hundreds of performances around the world. It just totally resonated outward and outward and outward. We're proud of that. But I think we're even prouder of the fact that Danai felt she had a platform to really look into her country, her background.
Part of Danai's success and her brand is her identity and her willingness to bring her African heritage front and center with everything she does. We are certainly living in a time where Black people are reclaiming their beauty, their identity. We still have a long way to go, but the fight continues.
In 2007, fresh off a successful tour within the Continuum, Danai returned to New York. But once there, she was hit with the harsh realities of a brutal and unforgiving industry.
As an actor trying to get a job, I went through a good chunk of time broke. And I had to go into temping. So I was temping at this law firm where I was like, am I doing the right thing with my life? Am I not meant to be doing this? I was freaking out a little bit. It was an intense time. I was like, do I need to go back to the continent? And then a job came along, an acting job, was pretty much offered to me, and it was gonna allow me opportunities economically. But I didn't find the character very interesting.
Whatever movies, whatever plays, she really has a very high standard for parts.
The character might be underdeveloped. The character might be stereotyped. And that was something that always got me, was I knew all these very talented Black women, but didn't see them get those juicy, complex, big roles. And I'm signing a potentially 7-year contract. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I knew what I had to do was to pull myself out of the running.
Roles that fit into your own sort of sense of who you are and your own DNA is a smart career choice, or it's a smart life choice. I think what she's trying to do is be true to herself, and authenticity is really irreplaceable, whether it's in what you do day to day for work, but also certainly as a storyteller and as an artist.
There's no safety net. It was that kind of moment where it was like, okay, so who do I become? Writing my play was not really gonna pay my bills, but it's for me. And I feel like a big part of who I am is I'm trying to not allow too many distractions of the world to stop me from telling the stories I feel like I have to be the vessel to tell.
So why don't others do that? Why do you think more haven't gone the route that you have in trying to create and not just perform?
Sometimes it's about a decision. This is who I am, this is what I do. I made that decision in Cape Town. It was like, I have to address it myself. Like, basically, you have to be your own hero.
Frustrated by the lack of well-developed roles for Black actors, Danai resolved to continue creating her own roles and stories just as she was taught.
Danai and I met in the theater world in New York, and she sent me this play called Eclipsed. Maybe 5 pages in, I called my agent and said, I don't know where this play is going, but I want to do it, because within the first 5 pages, I knew that she was doing something different. Eclipsed is a play about 5 women who have been kidnapped from their villages in Liberia and survive, maintain their humanity, and inspire each other to be better. One thing that I think we both have felt, having received many scripts about Africa, you start to see this sort of wash of Africanness, a sense that Africa is a country, and people wear African cloth and they speak with African accents. That, of course, drives me crazy because I come from a very rich culture in South Africa. We were both feeling this need for our own stories to be told. And rather than wait around for it to happen, she just made it happen. So after we did the initial workshop, we then did a production in Washington, D.C., a full production, and a full production at Yale Rep. So the next step after those successful productions was to bring it to Broadway. And we couldn't get it there.
Over 1,900 plays are produced each year. About 20 of those plays make it to Broadway. A majority of those 20, over 3/4 almost, are musicals or comedies. Greater odds of getting struck by lightning than getting a play on Broadway.
you are a white playwright writing a play about middle-class white lives, your play will most likely get done, and get done quite a lot. But even that play will be hard to get to Broadway. Broadway is the most competitive field. There were many times where usual suspects had said to me at a party or in an elevator, "Do you really think that show should go to Broadway?"
It's irrational to not have a global voice constantly penetrating the Great White Way. It should be global voices all the time, so that it's not even a big deal when it's all women of color.
And I'll never ever forget one day Danai she took my hands and she held them and she said, "We're gonna have to give this one up to the universe."
After 5 long years, Danai's passion project was put on hold. But just as she gave Eclipse to the universe gave her back the chance of a lifetime.
When it came, it became the role that I really felt called to. I've never seen anything like her. But a year before, I had a TV job being offered to me that wasn't where my heart was. If I had taken it, I would not have been available to audition for Michonne.
Accepting the role of Michonne in 2012, Danai joined the cast of The Walking Dead, AMC's hit show with a weekly average of nearly 11 million viewers.
Well, I sort of coined the phrase that it's a family drama set in hell. It's basically a story about humanity and survival.
To me, what I loved about The Walking Dead was that it felt like a war zone. It felt like you could take out the zombies and you could replace it with a society that collapses. When I watched it and read the graphic novel, it started to research Michonne. She felt like one of the women I'd researched during my time creating Eclipsed. And it felt like what I researched when I was looking at Liberia, because she felt like a woman of war who, like some women in Liberian war, turned themselves into their own weapon, into their own army, and found a whole different type of strength in themselves as a result.
Her role on Walking Dead, it could have just been this angry, machete-wielding black woman, and it's not that. It's way more nuanced, it's way more intellectual. So she's taken something from the page and made it something a lot more robust. She's able to sort of work within that system and find roles that she can grasp onto and really make her own.
Look, she's got dreads and a katana. I mean, she comes with her own badassery. I mean, that's a given. What Danai brought to it was the 3 dimensions and the depth and the trauma, and that's what really made people fall in love with this character.
It doesn't matter how fictitious it is if it's connected to something that's truly human story worthy. I want to tell African women's stories and how women have to deal with very specific traumas as a result of war. There was a very interesting parallel I was finding.
In 2015, with her star on the rise, Danai would get one more chance to break down that perennial barrier to Broadway. This time, help would come in the form of a recent Oscar winner.
I understudied the girl when I was at Yale, and I was just so moved. And so once 12 Years a Slave came out, a few people wanted to know what I wanted to do. I said I wanted to do Eclipse because it had stayed with me.
And literally, that's how we got Broadway.
Lupita, she took the lead on that. And boy, are we glad about that, because what ended up happening was way more than we ever imagined for Eclipsed. We were nominated for 6 Tony Awards, and I was the first woman of color to ever be nominated for Best Director of a Play. And it was crazy that it was 2016 and it was the first time something like that had happened. Something I will never forget was on opening night on Broadway, Danai and I, during a curtain call, walked on stage to take our bow with the girls, the women of the cast. And we were crying, all the actresses were crying. And we looked out at the audience and there's all these strangers applauding and weeping because they saw these 7 black women on Broadway, where we're not always welcome, just staking our claim. And, I just remember feeling so grateful that she had taken it upon herself to become a writer and not just an actor.
Danai had finally realized her dream, but she knew that wasn't enough to satisfy her true aspirations.
It's not just, oh, yay, we made it to Broadway. I wanted to make sure Eclipsed was a platform of activism. What we did was we created a dedication series around the girls who are still in captivity with Boko Haram.
219 girls, including Amina, have been missing for the last 764 days.
And we would dedicate each performance to them. Mr. Bono himself was so kind to come and start it. He did the first one.
Lydia, Habila. Lydia, Habila. Rejoice, Musa. Rejoice, Musa.
These actors, they had nothing left in them, but they still wanted to do this ceremony at the end of each performance, where they named one of these girls and made sure that we noticed them, that their names were spoken. Very powerful idea to name somebody. By naming them, you're now involved with them.
We witness the power of naming. The power of naming your pain, naming your joy, naming yourself. The simple act of declaring a name can make a puppet.
I just broke. It was something so powerful about seeing that Broadway audience, but they had the names of these girls in their mouths, and they had the information of how to connect with these issues in their hands. And it just created, we hope, a whole nother realm of connection and conscious responsibility to what's happening globally around women and girls' issues.
Having now achieved the highest levels of critical acclaim, Danai was met with her biggest opportunity yet, a movie whose success would parallel her own.
When I was growing up, I was very athletic. And then I remember I was like, I want to be an action hero. I want to do something action-y. Careful what you ask for, because it came.
Having now grossed over $1 billion worldwide, the 2018 blockbuster, Black Panther, has become the third highest grossing US release of all time. It has introduced Danai as both a viable name in Hollywood and as a role model to young women around the world.
The thing that really connected me in a powerful way was her love and her loyalty to this thing called Wakanda, this nation that was never colonized and consequently became the most advanced nation on the globe and used its resources for its own people, which Africa never got to do. The idea of being a guardian of that place, of being a protector alongside Black Panther, to me, that just resonated so deeply. Africans always wonder, who would we have been if we weren't colonized?
I know Danai has been very vocal about the lack of great, impassioned roles for African Americans, but one of the most remarkable things and touching things that ever happened to me working here for 25 years, an young African American woman came in and she said, I'm going to do Ophelia from Hamlet, whatever it was, and a piece from In the Continuum by Danai Gurira. And you went, wow.
That was the point, because I literally made In the Continuum all monologues, because I couldn't find any monologues to audition with. And so we hope other Black girls now have more to pick up and use, really show what they can do in their own dynamic way that feels culturally specific to them.
Her entire life, Danai has been driven by her mission to see the faces and voices of African women represented in popular culture. And in achieving that goal, she's blazed a trail that is giving a voice to the next generation of storytellers.
To the artists, anyone, whatever you do, the continent needs it. I'm one of the few African writers that are kind of known in a certain realm, and that shouldn't be that way. There are people on the continent who are artists. They were born to be artists. They do it despite everything.
So you guys just know many people out there support you. You are a future. We are excited about what you're doing.
I can't tell every story. There's so many stories that the world must hear. It's about making sure the African voice gets heard. Come along, my sisters. I opened the gate.
Wakanda forever!
Flip to the personal side. Any secret hobbies? Are you a rollerblader at heart? We're gonna find you diving out of plane.
Well, I do enjoy a karaoke. Like if it's there.
She's annoyingly really quite good at karaoke.
I do like to go into some old school YouTube,
I like that.
I'll contribute.
I like that.